217 miles from shore, no boat in sight, no life jacket, just a single German shepherd swimming for his life. The midnight black dog fought against the merciless waves, his powerful legs weakening with each desperate stroke, his lungs burning as salt water crashed over his muzzle. Death circled him like a predator, patient and inevitable. How did a highly trained police K9 end up abandoned in the middle of the Atlantic? What dark secrets was he carrying that someone wanted buried at the bottom of the ocean? If you've ever wondered about the unbreakable bond between humans and their four-legged protectors, this story will show you depths of loyalty you never imagined possible. Subscribe to K9 Code Red now and join us on this incredible journey of betrayal, courage, and redemption that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about man's best friend. Miles off the North Carolina coast, 43-year-old Jack Sullivan guided his weathered fishing boat through calm waters. The early morning sky was painted in watercolor hues of pink and orange, a deceptive beauty that experienced fishermen knew often preceded a storm. Jack had set out before dawn, hoping to land some yellowfin tuna, but 6 hours in, all he'd caught was disappointment and the beginnings of a sunburn. He stood at the helm, his weathered face creased with the permanent lines of someone who had spent decades squinting against the sun's reflection on water. His boat, the _Sea Whisper _ was modest but reliable, paid for with 15 years of dawn fishing trips and careful saving. At 43, Jack's broad shoulders still carried the strength of his younger days, though his dark hair had begun to surrender to salt and pepper at the temples. The ocean stretched endlessly around him, a vast blue emptiness that had always brought him peace, until now. Something caught his eye, a dark shape in the distance, bobbing inconsistently with the waves. Initially, Jack assumed it was driftwood, perhaps a piece of wreckage carried by the Gulf Stream. But there was something about its movement, how it seemed to fight against the current rather than surrender to it, that tugged at his instincts. He grabbed his binoculars from the console and trained them on the shape, adjusting the focus until the image sharpened. The binoculars nearly slipped from his hands. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. It was a dog, a German shepherd with a black and tan coat, struggling to keep its head above water. No land in sight, no boats nearby, nothing but miles of open ocean. Jack's mind raced through possibilities, each more implausible than the last. Had the dog fallen overboard from a passing yacht, been swept out by a rip current from some distant shore? Neither explanation made sense this far out. He throttled the engine and steered directly toward the animal, his heart pounding. As he drew closer, the dog's desperate situation became horrifyingly clear. Its powerful legs, designed for running, not swimming, were moving erratically now. Its head dipped beneath the surface with each wave, resurfacing with less strength each time. The animal had minutes left, maybe seconds. Jack cut the engine when he was about 20 feet away, not wanting the propellers to injure the dog. He leaned over the side and called out, "Hang on, buddy, I've got you." The dog didn't respond. Its eyes were glazed, unfocused, the light of consciousness dimming. Without hesitation, Jack stripped off his shirt, kicked off his shoes, and dove into the Atlantic. The water was colder than he expected, a shock to his system that momentarily stole his breath. Salt stung his eyes as he powered through the swells, keeping his gaze locked on the dog's weakening form. The shepherd was massive, easily 90 pounds of solid muscle under normal circumstances, but now that weight was dragging it down. When Jack finally reached him, the dog's legs stopped moving entirely, its body going limp in surrender. "Oh no you don't," Jack grunted, wrapping one arm under the animal's chest. "You didn't make it this far to give up now." He kicked furiously with his legs, using his free arm to stroke toward the boat. The distance felt impossible, each yard gained a battle against the weight of the dog and the pull of the sea. By the time they reached the _Sea Whisper Jack's muscles screamed in protest. He pushed the shepherd up toward the ladder he'd dropped before jumping in, supporting the animal's weight from below. Somehow, through instinct or some last reserve of strength, the dog found the presence of mind to claw its way up and onto the deck, where it collapsed in a heap of wet fur and trembling limbs. Jack hauled himself aboard seconds later, chest heaving, arms quivering from exertion. He knelt beside the German shepherd, running his hands gently over its body, checking for injuries. The dog's breathing was shallow but steady, its fur matted with salt, its paws raw and bleeding. "You're alive," Jack whispered, still trying to process what had just happened. "You crazy beautiful beast, you're alive." He grabbed a jug of fresh water and a clean towel from the cabin, returning to pour some water into his cupped hand, holding it to the dog's muzzle. After a moment's hesitation, a long tongue darted out, lapping weakly. Jack sat back on his heels, heart still racing, soaked to the bone and shivering, not from cold, but from the sheer impossibility of what he'd just witnessed. He looked around at the endless blue stretching in every direction. "What on earth were you doing out here, boy?" he asked softly. The dog didn't answer, but as Jack looked into those amber eyes, something flickered there. Not fear, not pain, but something deeper, a silent, unbreakable will to survive. Chapter 2. The Stranger from the Sea. The journey back to shore felt like the longest 2 hours of Jack's life. Every few minutes, his eyes darted to the German shepherd sprawled on his deck, checking for the rise and fall of its rib cage. The dog hadn't moved since collapsing, but those eyes, those intelligent, wary eyes, remained open, watching Jack's every move. Jack's mind churned with questions as he navigated toward the marina in Southport, North Carolina. The dog had no collar, no harness, no life vest, not even the microchip tag that most pets wore these days. The only identifying feature was raw skin under his front legs, as though he'd been swimming for hours, maybe longer. Jack had heard stories of cruel owners dumping unwanted pets at sea, a thought that made his stomach turn, but not this far out. 217 miles offshore placed them well beyond the continental shelf. No one took pleasure boats out this far. This was commercial fishing territory, cargo ship lanes, military waters. The dog shifted slightly, a low whine escaping its throat. "Easy there," Jack said softly. "We're almost home." The animal's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, but otherwise remained still, conserving energy. Jack wondered if it had been trained to respond to commands. Its muscular build and alert demeanor, even in exhaustion, suggested some kind of working dog background. By the time they reached the marina, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the docks. Jack had already decided against taking the dog straight to animal control. Something inside him resisted that. Instead, after securing the boat, he carefully lifted the German shepherd, surprised by how the animal allowed itself to be carried without resistance, and placed him in the bed of his pickup truck, cushioned with old blankets. He drove straight to Coastal Veterinary Clinic on the outskirts of town. It was a small practice run by Dr. Sarah Chen, a former classmate who'd chosen veterinary school while Jack had opted for the Navy. The clinic was about to close when Jack burst through the door, the German shepherd cradled awkwardly in his arms. The receptionist looked up, startled. "Sir, you can't just He almost drowned 217 miles offshore," Jack interrupted, his voice urgent but steady. "No ID, no explanation. I just need someone to look at him." The word offshore silenced the room. In a coastal community where most residents made their living from the sea, the implications were immediately understood. Dr. Chen appeared from a back room, her eyes widening at the sight. 200 miles, are you serious? Jack nodded grimly. Found him swimming alone, nothing else in sight. Within seconds the shepherd was whisked into an examination room. Jack paced the small waiting area, leaving damp footprints on the linoleum floor. He hadn't even changed out of his wet clothes, hadn't thought to grab his phone from the boat, hadn't done anything but focus on getting the dog help. After 20 minutes that felt like hours, Sarah emerged, pulling off latex gloves. "He's severely dehydrated, scraped up and exhausted beyond belief," she said, her voice tinged with professional amazement. "But his heart is strong. Somehow he made it." Jack exhaled. "Thank God." "No microchip," Sarah continued, "which is strange for a dog of this quality. He's clearly well-bred, probably from working lines. German shepherds like this can cost thousands." "Could he have fallen off a boat?" Jack asked. Sarah shook her head. "Not likely, not that far out. And Jack." She paused, her expression troubled. "We found something else." She handed him a small metal object, crusted with salt. Jack turned it over in his palm. It was a broken piece of what looked like a military-style dog tag, most of the engraving corroded away by seawater. Only a single letter remained visible, S. "There's something else," Sarah said, lowering her voice. "He has scarring consistent with a tactical vest, the kind they use on police and military K9. Jack looked up sharply. You think he's a police dog, or military, Sarah replied. And look at this. She showed Jack a photo on her tablet, a close-up of a small mark on the inside of the dog's ear. It was a tattoo, barely visible, K9S7. What does that mean? Jack asked. No idea, but whatever it is, someone went to a lot of trouble to mark him, and Jack. Sarah's eyes met his, serious now. Given where you found him, you should probably report this. Jack knew she was right. Standard procedure would be to contact the Coast Guard, file a report about the unusual rescue, yet something held him back. The same instinct that had made him dive into the ocean without hesitation. Can I take him home tonight? He asked instead, just until he's stronger. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. His vitals are stabilizing. I've given him fluids and treated his paws. He needs rest more than anything. She handed Jack a bag of medications and special food. Bring him back in 2 days unless something changes. Jack carried the dog back to his truck. The shepherd seemed slightly more alert now, his eyes tracking movement, his ears swiveling to catch sounds. When Jack started the engine, the dog tensed, then settled again, watching the road with unexpected focus. Jack's home was a weathered cabin on 3 acres of wooded land outside of town, close enough to the water that you could smell the salt on the breeze. It was nothing fancy, 1 bedroom, an open kitchen and living space, and a wraparound porch that sagged slightly on the north side, but it was his, paid for, with years of Navy service and careful saving. He carried the dog inside, setting him on a folded blanket near the wood stove. The German shepherd surveyed his new surroundings with methodical attention, his gaze moving from corner to corner before settling back on Jack. You got a name, boy? Jack asked, setting down a bowl of water. The dog blinked slowly, but didn't react to the question. Jack crouched down, studying the animal's face. In the warm light of the cabin, he could see the dog's true coloring, not just black and tan, but a deep shadowy black across his back and face, like midnight had settled into his fur. Shadow, Jack said suddenly. That's what I'll call you. At least until we figure out who you really are. The dog's ears twitched at the name, but otherwise, he remained still, conserving energy. His eyes, though, those amber eyes stayed fixed on Jack, alert and assessing. Before going to bed, Jack sat cross-legged on the floor near the dog. You made it out of something no dog should have survived, he said softly. I don't know how or why, but I promise I'm going to figure it out. Shadow blinked slowly, not trust, not yet, but acknowledgement. Something was there, something growing. That night, Jack dreamed of dark water and distant helicopters, of shadowy figures and desperate swimming. He woke at dawn to the soft sound of claws against the wooden floor. For a moment, he thought he'd imagined it, but when he opened his eyes, Shadow was there, standing, walking slowly around the cabin. The dog moved stiffly, favoring his right front paw, but he was moving under his own power. Jack sat up, careful not to make sudden movements. Look at you, he said quietly. Shadow didn't wag his tail, or show the excited greeting most dogs would after being rescued. Instead, he paused, looked at Jack, and blinked once. Acknowledgement. Nothing more. Jack heated some of the special food Sarah had provided, and set it in a bowl on the floor. Shadow approached cautiously, sniffed the offering, then began to eat. Slowly, methodically, without the desperate hunger Jack had expected. You're not just smart, Jack murmured, watching the animal's controlled movements. You're trained, I can feel it. There was a precision to Shadow's behavior, the way he ate without spilling, the way he drank water in measured laps, the way his eyes constantly scanned the room. He didn't flinch at sudden noises. He didn't beg for more food. He didn't bark or whimper. He simply observed, calculated, like a soldier surveying unfamiliar territory. Jack recognized that behavior. During his 12 years in the Navy, first as a rescue swimmer and later as part of a special operations support team, he'd worked alongside military K-9 units. Shadow carried himself the same way those dogs did, always alert, always ready. But that still didn't explain how he'd ended up swimming for his life in the middle of the Atlantic. After breakfast, Jack stepped out onto his porch. The morning air was cool, carrying the familiar salt pine scent of the Carolina coast. Beyond the trees, he could just make out the glimmer of water. He heard the soft pad of paws behind him. Shadow had followed, moving with more strength now. The dog stood beside Jack, looking out at the same view. "You've seen things, haven't you?" Jack said without looking down. Shadow didn't respond, but his posture straightened slightly. His ears perked forward as though listening not just to Jack's words but to their meaning. Jack pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. After 3 rings, a gruff voice answered. "This better be important, Sullivan." "It's not even 8. Mike," Jack said. "I need your eyes on something, today if possible." Mike Anderson had been Jack's closest friend during his Navy days. After retirement, Mike had trained K-9 units for police departments across 3 states. If anyone could identify what kind of dog Shadow was, it would be him. "This about a woman?" Mike asked, suspicious. "No," Jack replied, glancing down at Shadow. "It's about a dog." 3 hours later, Mike's pickup truck rumbled up the driveway. Shadow, who had been dozing near the wood stove, immediately rose to his feet, ears forward, body tense but not aggressive. Mike entered without knocking, a habit from their service days. He was a broad-shouldered man, with a closely cropped gray beard and watchful eyes that missed nothing. He stopped just inside the door, his gaze immediately finding Shadow. "That him?" he asked quietly. Jack nodded. "Found him swimming 217 miles offshore yesterday. No collar, no chip." Mike let out a low whistle. "That's not possible. Tell that to him," Jack replied. Mike crouched down, not approaching the dog, but studying him from a distance. "Sit," he commanded clearly. Shadow didn't move. "Down," Mike tried. Still no response. But then Mike did something subtle. He extended 2 fingers, palm down, and moved them in a slight curve downward. Instantly, Shadow dropped to the floor, tail tucked slightly, eyes locked on Mike. Jack's eyes widened. "What was that?" "Silent command," Mike said, his voice hushed with something like reverence. "Used in tactical operations. Jack, this isn't just any police dog, this is special forces." Jack's stomach tightened. "Military, maybe." Mike stood slowly, "but not regular K-9 Corps. This is something else." He turned to Jack, expression grave. "Where did you say you found him again?" 217 miles offshore, middle of nowhere." Mike's face darkened. "Nobody puts a dog like this in the water by accident." "You think someone tried to?" Jack couldn't finish the sentence.
"I think," Mike said carefully, "that you didn't just rescue a stray, you pulled something classified out of the ocean." Chapter 3, Ghosts from the Deep. That night Jack couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, staring at Shadow, who now rested at the foot of his bed. The broken metal tag with the S seemed to burn a hole in his pocket. No chip, no ID, no answers, but now there was something more. A mystery, a trail, and the terrifying possibility that this dog had seen something or escaped something someone wanted to keep secret. His mind kept returning to Mike's parting words, "Be careful, Jack. A dog like this doesn't just appear. Someone trained him, someone deployed him, and someone tried to get rid of him. That someone might not be happy he survived." Jack reached down to run his hand over Shadow's back. The dog leaned slightly into the touch, the first real sign of trust he'd shown. "What did you see out there?" Jack whispered. In the 2 days that followed, Shadow gained strength rapidly. His raw paws began to heal. His coat regained some luster with proper food and care, and he started following Jack everywhere, not like a pet seeking affection, but like a partner maintaining formation. He never barked, never whined, never behaved like a normal dog. He moved with purpose, always. What disturbed Jack most was how Shadow reacted to certain sounds. Not thunderstorms, not the neighbor's tractor, but helicopters. Every time one passed overhead, even faint and distant, Shadow would freeze. His ears would drop, his body would crouch low, and his eyes, those alert, intelligent eyes, would turn hard, scanning the sky with unmistakable recognition. On the 3rd morning, while Shadow was exploring the property perimeter, which he did with military precision every day at sunrise, Jack made another call.
Sarah, it's Jack Sullivan. That dog I brought in, I need a favor. 2 hours later, Jack was sitting in Sarah's private office at the veterinary clinic, staring at a computer screen. Shadow lay at his feet, watching the door. You realize I could lose my license for this, Sarah said, typing rapidly. Accessing military databases without clearance is a federal offense. You're just running a microchip check, Jack replied innocently. Sarah gave him a withering look. Through backdoor channels using my ex-husband's security credentials. Her ex had been a contractor for various government agencies, building systems to track service animals. This is the last time I'm doing something like this for you, Jack. The screen flickered, lines of code scrolling by. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating through levels of security with practiced ease. Here, she said suddenly, I don't have access to the full file, but I can see a reference number. Jack leaned forward, reading over her shoulder. Set 7 breed, German Shepherd sex, male assigned, so com Devon Drew K, 9 unit handler, redacted status, decommissioned presumed lost, Operation Blackfish date. 4 days before Jack found him. Zit Devon Drew, Jack breathed, a chill running down his spine. That's SEAL Team 6. Sarah looked at him, eyes wide. Jack, what have you gotten yourself into? It's what he got himself into, Jack answered, looking down at Shadow. And someone marked him as lost, but didn't bother to recover him. Sarah closed the window quickly, wiping the search from the system. You need to report this, now. This is way above our pay grade. Jack nodded, but a nagging doubt held him back. If Shadow had been deliberately abandoned at sea, reporting his rescue to the same authorities might put the dog right back in danger. As they walked back to Jack's truck, Sarah grabbed his arm. Jack, be careful. Whatever this dog was involved in, I know, he cut her off. But I can't just. The words died in his throat as he spotted a black SUV parked across the street, its windows tinted beyond legal limits. 2 men in plain clothes sat inside, one speaking into a phone, the other staring directly at them. Shadow had seen them too. A low growl rumbled in his chest, the first sound Jack had heard him make since the rescue. Get inside, Jack said quietly to Sarah. Don't look back. He loaded Shadow into the truck quickly, keeping his movements casual despite the hammering of his heart. As he pulled away from the clinic, the SUV's engine started. They found us fast, Jack muttered, checking the rearview mirror. The SUV maintained a careful distance, not closing in, but definitely following. Shadow stood alert in the passenger seat, ears forward, body rigid with tension. He wasn't panicking, he was calculating, preparing. Jack recognized that posture from his own military days. Shadow was shifting into operational mode. Instead of heading home, Jack took a series of random turns through town, confirming what he already suspected. The SUV stayed with them, 2 car lengths back, never losing sight. All right, Jack said, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Let's see how committed they are. He turned onto the coastal highway, accelerating north toward the Outer Banks. Shadow braced himself against the dashboard, legs spread for stability, eyes fixed on the road ahead. You've done this before, haven't you? Jack asked. Shadow's ears twitched in what Jack could have sworn was agreement. 20 miles up the coast, Jack spotted his opportunity, an unmarked service road that cut through the pine forest, used primarily by park rangers and utility workers. He'd discovered it years ago while camping. Without signaling, he cut the wheel hard, tires skidding on loose gravel as the truck barreled down the narrow path. The SUV shot past the turnoff, unable to react in time. Jack killed the headlights and continued deeper into the forest, navigating by moonlight filtering through the trees. After a mile, he pulled into a small clearing and cut the engine. We've got maybe 10 minutes, he told Shadow, who was already scanning their surroundings. They'll realize they lost us and double back. Jack reached under his seat and pulled out a go bag, a habit from his Navy days that he'd never abandoned. It contained cash, a burner phone, basic first aid supplies, and a hunting knife. He grabbed his jacket from the back seat, then turned to Shadow. We can't go home, he said. Not yet. Shadow's amber eyes locked with his, a question in their depths. I don't know who they are, Jack admitted, but they're tracking you, not me. That means they know you survived, and they want you back, or silenced. The dog's posture changed subtly, a straightening of the spine, a tensing of muscles. He was ready.
Good boy, Jack said softly. Let's go. They abandoned the truck, moving deeper into the forest on foot. Jack had spent enough time in these woods to navigate by the stars, heading east toward the coast. Shadow padded silently beside him, matching his pace, occasionally pausing to sniff the air or listen for pursuers. After an hour of hiking, they reached a small inlet where Jack kept an old John boat hidden under a camouflage tarp, another remnant of his more paranoid post-Navy days that now seemed prescient rather than excessive. In you go, he whispered, helping Shadow into the boat. Using an oar rather than the small motor to minimize noise, Jack pushed them out into the black water of the inlet, which eventually opened into the intracoastal waterway. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the sky, the sliver of moon providing just enough light to navigate. Shadow sat at the bow, nose lifted to catch the salt breeze, eyes scanning continuously. Not once did he whimper or show hesitation about being back on the water. Whatever trauma he'd experienced swimming for his life had been compartmentalized with military efficiency. You're something else, Jack said quietly. 2 hours of careful paddling brought them to a secluded stretch of beach near the abandoned Hatteras Lighthouse Station. Jack beached the boat and covered it with driftwood and sand. Shadow jumped out, immediately circling their position, checking for threats before returning to Jack's side. All clear, Jack asked. Shadow looked up at him, and for the first time, his tail wagged slightly, just once, a brief sweep, but unmistakable. They found shelter in the old lighthouse keeper's cottage, long abandoned, but still structurally sound. Jack forced open a boarded window, helping Shadow through before climbing in himself. The interior smelled of dust and salt, but it was dry and hidden from the road. Using his phone's flashlight, Jack explored their temporary haven. One room with a rusted metal bed frame, a small table, and a stone fireplace. It wasn't much, but it would do. Home sweet home, he muttered, setting down his bag. At least until we figure out who's after you. Shadow circled the room twice, then settled near the door, positioning himself between Jack and any potential threat. His posture set it all on guard. Jack sat on the floor, back against the wall, and pulled out the broken tag they'd found in Shadow's fur. He turned it over in his fingers, studying the single visible letter. Shadow, he said aloud. Is that what they called you, or was it something else? Sierra, Sigma. The dog looked up at the names, but showed no particular recognition. Shadow it is then, Jack decided, at least until we learn otherwise. He pulled out his burner phone and dialed Mike's number from memory. When his friend answered, Jack spoke without preamble. I need everything you can find on Devi G. Ugh. 9 operations, specifically anything coded Blackfish. Someone's looking for my dog, and they found us way too quickly. Mike was silent for a moment. Jack, that's classified higher than either of us ever had clearance for. I know, but Shadow was part of it, and someone tried to kill him for it. Another pause. Give me 24 hours, and Jack, stay dark. The call ended. Jack powered off the phone completely and removed the battery, a precaution against tracking. He looked over at Shadow, who watched him with those intelligent eyes. Looks like it's just you and me now, partner, he said softly. Shadow blinked once, slowly, and in that moment, Jack knew, whatever came next, they were facing it together. Chapter 4. The handler dawn broke over the Atlantic, painting the sky in watercolor strokes of pink and gold. Jack stood at the lighthouse keeper's cottage window, watching the day emerge while Shadow patrolled the perimeter outside. They'd passed a restless night, taking turns, keeping watch, communicating with a synchronicity that felt eerily natural. Jack's military instincts had fully reawakened, hypervigilance, constant threat assessment, strategic thinking, skills he'd tried to leave behind when he traded Navy life for a fishing boat. Through the grimy window, he watched Shadow return from his patrol, moving with the fluid grace of an animal that had fully recovered its strength. 3 days ago, that same dog had been barely clinging to life in the middle of the ocean. The resilience was astonishing. Shadow entered through the broken window, shaking sand from his fur, before settling near Jack's feet. His posture was relaxed but ready, a soldier at ease but not off duty. What did you see out there, boy? Jack asked, more to himself than the dog. To his surprise, Shadow rose and nudged Jack's hand with his nose, then padded to the door, looking back expectantly. You want to show me something? Shadow's ears perked forward, affirmation. Jack followed him outside, down a narrow path through sea oats to the beach. The morning tide was going out, leaving wet sand glistening in the early light. Shadow led him about 200 yards north, then stopped, nose pointing toward the water. At first, Jack saw nothing unusual, just waves lapping at the shore. Then he noticed what Shadow was fixated on, a small black object bobbing in the surf. Jack waded into the knee-deep water to retrieve it. It was a waterproof tactical camera, the kind used in military operations to document missions. The casing was damaged but intact, with clear tooth marks on one corner, canine teeth. Jack stared at Shadow in dawning comprehension. You carried this from out there. Shadow's gaze was steady, unwavering. With trembling fingers, Jack examined the device. Its power button was unresponsive, but the memory card slot was sealed tight. He popped it open and extracted a tiny SD card, miraculously dry inside its rubber housing. Good boy, he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Good boy. They returned to the cottage, where Jack carefully dried the card with his shirt before inserting it into his phone. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the screen lit up with a file directory. The first file was a document labeled Blackfish_Directive. Jack opened it, heart pounding. SEPN Operation Blackfish Classification, Top Secret Asset, K97 Shadow, Handler, CPO Marcus Reeves Mission, Surveillance Recovery Target, Vessel Eastern Star, Coordinates, Redacted, Objective, Confirm Illegal Weapons Transfer Secondary, Recover Sample Material Notes, Asset equipped with recording equipment. Handler will maintain offshore position. Asset will deploy independently, complete surveillance, and return to extraction point. Warning: if compromised, Protocol 0 is authorized. Asset is expendable. SEPN Jack felt cold, despite the warming day. Protocol 0. In his Navy days, that had only meant one thing: eliminate all evidence, including operatives if necessary. The next files were videos, dozens of them, mostly showing training exercises. Shadow, swimming alongside boats, retrieving objects underwater, boarding vessels from the sea. The dog's abilities were extraordinary, far beyond standard military, canine training. Then Jack found the last video file, dated 4 days before he'd rescued Shadow. With shaking hands, he pressed play. The footage was chaotic, shot from a camera mounted on Shadow's tactical vest. It showed the deck of a large ship at night, lit only by dim safety lights. Shadow was moving silently along the edge, staying in shadows. Voices could be heard speaking Russian, though Jack couldn't make out the words. The camera panned as Shadow crept behind some cargo containers. 2 men came into view, standing over an open crate. One held up something that glinted in the low light, a small metal cylinder. Suddenly, shouts erupted. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, catching Shadow in its glare. Gunshots rang out. The camera jolted violently as Shadow ran, racing across the deck. More shouting, more gunfire. Then Shadow leapt. The footage showed nothing but the dark water rushing up, then blackness as he plunged into the ocean. The video continued underwater, Shadow swimming powerfully away from the ship's lights. After several minutes, he surfaced, the camera showing open ocean in all directions. Shadow swam toward where a boat should have been waiting, his extraction point, but there was nothing there, just empty water. The footage continued for another 30 minutes, showing Shadow swimming in increasingly erratic circles, searching for his handler. Finally, the camera battery died, the screen going black. Jack sat in stunned silence, the phone trembling in his hand. Shadow had been sent on a mission to gather intelligence on a Russian vessel suspected of weapons trafficking. He'd been discovered, shot at, forced to escape into the ocean, and then abandoned by his own team. "They left you out there to die," Jack whispered, looking at Shadow with new understanding. "They activated Protocol 0. Shadow's eyes held his, and in that moment, Jack saw not just intelligence but awareness, a complete understanding of what had happened to him. The burner phone buzzed, startling them both. Jack quickly reassembled it and answered. It's Mike, I've got something, and it's not good. Devgiruk, 9 Unit was running an off-books operation called Blackfish. Something went wrong. Officially, the asset was lost at sea. I know, Jack said grimly. I just watched the footage. Silence on the other end. Jesus, Jack. What footage? Shadow brought back a camera. He recorded everything. Mike cursed under his breath. That changes everything. The men looking for you, they're not trying to recover a dog, they're trying to recover evidence. Of what? I'm not sure yet, but rumors say Blackfish went rogue, operating outside the chain of command. And Jack, Mike's voice dropped lower. Their handler has been reported AWOL since the operation failed. The implication was clear. Shadow's handler had abandoned him, then gone off the grid. But why? I need to meet Shadow's handler, Jack said. He's the only one who knows the whole story. That's suicide, Mike argued. If he activated Protocol Zero on his own dog, then he betrayed everything he stood for. Jack finished. But I need answers. Shadow deserves that much. Mike was quiet for a moment. There might be a way. Word is that Reeves has a cabin in the Smokies. It's off-grid, perfect for someone who doesn't want to be found. Can you get me coordinates? I can do better. I can take you there. But Jack, Mike's voice hardened. If this goes sideways, I wasn't involved. Understood. Crystal clear. Jack ended the call and looked at Shadow, who had listened to the entire conversation with unsettling focus. We're going to find him, boy, the man who left you to die. Shadow's ears perked forward, his body tensing slightly. He understood. Before they could move, Shadow suddenly froze, ears swiveling toward the door. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Warning, not fear. Jack immediately dropped to a crouch, pulling Shadow away from the window. What is it? He whispered. The answer came seconds later, the distant thump of helicopter rotors cutting through the morning air. Shadow's reaction was immediate and severe. He dropped to the floor, body quivering, eyes wide with recognition. Jack peered carefully around the window frame. A black helicopter was sweeping the coastline about a mile north, flying low. Military, but with no visible markings. They're searching the shore, Jack muttered. They must have found the boat. The helicopter's search pattern was methodical, working its way south toward their position. They had minutes, maybe less. Time to go, Jack said, grabbing his backpack. Shadow was already at the back window, instinctively seeking an exit route away from the approaching threat. They slipped out and dashed for the tree line that bordered the beach, using the dunes for cover. The dense maritime forest provided immediate concealment as they pushed inland, away from the helicopter's search grid. For 2 hours, they moved steadily west, following game trails through the underbrush. Shadow took point, his senses far more acute than Jack's, pausing occasionally to listen or scent the air. Jack followed his lead without question, trusting the dog's instincts. By mid-afternoon, they reached a rural road where Jack managed to flag down a farmer in a pickup truck. He spun a quick story about his car breaking down, and the man offered them a ride to the nearest town. As they climbed into the truck bed, the farmer eyed Shadow. That's some dog you got there. Police K9, something like that, Jack replied, vaguely. Figure, the way he carries himself, military precision. My brother trained dogs for the army. Jack nodded, but offered nothing more. The farmer dropped them at a gas station in a small inland town. Jack bought supplies, paid cash, and called Mike from a payphone. They're using air support, Jack said without preamble. Whoever wants Shadow isn't just some rogue handler. It's bigger than that. Mike agreed grimly. I've been asking around. Operation Blackfish wasn't just about Russian weapons trafficking. It was about something on that ship. Something chemical or biological. Something bad enough that certain people would rather it stayed lost at sea. And Shadow saw it. Jack realized. He has evidence on that memory card, which makes him a liability to someone very powerful. I've arranged transportation. Be at the old paper mill south of town in 2 hours. And Jack, ditch your phone. They might be tracking it. Jack smashed his smartphone under his boot in the gas station bathroom, flushing the pieces down the toilet. The burner phone he kept, but powered off. 2 hours later, as dusk painted the sky in purple hues, Jack and Shadow waited in the shadows of the abandoned paper mill. A weathered pickup truck pulled into the lot, headlights flashing twice. Mike stepped out, accompanied by a woman Jack didn't recognize, tall, athletic, with sharp features and wary eyes. "This is Claire," Mike said simply. "Former handler, Naval Special Warfare K-9 unit." Claire didn't offer her hand. Her focus was entirely on Shadow, who had gone rigid at her appearance. "My God," she whispered. "It really is S7. Shadow's ears flattened slightly, but he didn't growl. He was assessing her, just as she was assessing him. "You know him?" Jack asked. Claire nodded. "I helped train him. He was the best we ever produced. Could swim 5 miles in open ocean, board vessels silently, retrieve objects underwater. We called him the Shadow, because he could slip in and out of places unseen." She crouched down, extending her hand palm down. "But I never expected to see him alive again." Shadow approached her cautiously, sniffing her hand before allowing a brief touch to his head. "Why would his handler abandon him?" Jack demanded. Claire's expression darkened. "Reeves was compromised. We suspected it for months, but couldn't prove anything. Then Blackfish happened." "What was on that ship?" Jack asked. Claire and Mike exchanged glances. "We don't know exactly," Claire admitted, "but intelligence suggested it was a new bioweapon, one that leaves no trace, can't be attributed to any country, perfect for assassination. And Reeves, we think he was hired to make sure it disappeared, and any evidence with it, including Shadow." Jack's stomach tightened with anger. "He sent his own dog to die, which tells you everything you need to know about Marcus Reeves." Claire said coldly. "We need to find him before he delivers whatever Shadow was sent to verify." "I have the footage," Jack said. Shadow brought back a camera. Claire's eyes widened. "Let me see it." Now, back in Mike's truck, they reviewed the footage again. Claire watched intently, occasionally freezing frames to study details. "There," she said, pointing to the metal cylinder one of the Russians had been holding. "That's a containment unit for biological materials. Heavily insulated, pressure locked, and look at the markings." She zoomed in on a symbol barely visible in the grainy footage, a double helix surrounded by Cyrillic text. "Project Viper," she translated. "It's a neural toxin the Russians have been developing for years. Undetectable, untraceable. One drop can simulate a heart attack or stroke. And Reeves is trying to get his hands on it," Mike concluded. "Or already has," Claire said grimly. "The question is who he's selling it to." "We need to move," Jack said, feeling the minutes ticking away. "How far to Reeves' cabin?" 3 hours if we push it," Mike answered. "Then let's push it." As they loaded into Mike's truck, Claire pulled Jack aside. "You should know, Shadow won't be the same dog he was before this. What he went through, it changes them. He may never fully trust humans again." Jack glanced at Shadow, who was already positioned in the truck bed, vigilant and ready. "He doesn't need to trust all humans," he replied. "Just me." Chapter 5. The Reckoning. The mountain roads twisted like dark ribbons through the dense forests of the Great Smoky Mountains. Mike drove with practiced skill, headlights cutting through fog that grew thicker as they climbed higher. In the cab, Claire studied maps on her tablet, while Jack and Shadow rode in the truck bed, the dog's eyes reflecting moonlight as he scanned their surroundings continuously. They had switched vehicles twice during the journey, first to Claire's SUV at a truck stop, then to Mike's hunting truck at his brother's property near the Tennessee border. Each transition executed with military precision, designed to shake any potential pursuer. Around midnight, they turned onto an unmarked fire road, the truck bouncing over ruts and exposed roots. After 3 miles of increasingly rough terrain, Mike killed the engine and the headlights. "We go on foot from here," he said softly. "Reeves' cabin is just over that ridge. If he's half the operator he used to be, he'll have the approach monitored." They gathered their gear in silence, night vision goggles, communications earpieces, and tactical vests that Claire had brought from a friend she refused to name. Jack suspected she was still active in some capacity, despite Mike's introduction suggesting otherwise. Shadow should lead, Claire said, fitting a specialized harness onto the dog. He knows Reeves' scent, and he'll detect any traps or surveillance before we do. Shadow accepted the harness without resistance, standing perfectly still, as Claire attached a small infrared beacon to it. He remembers his training, she observed. He remembers everything, Jack replied. They moved through the forest with practiced stealth, following Shadow's lead. The dog navigated the unfamiliar terrain with uncanny precision, choosing paths that offered both cover and quiet footing. Twice he froze, ears forward, signaling potential danger. Each time they discovered hidden trail cameras, which Claire disabled with expert hands. After 40 minutes of careful advancement, Shadow suddenly dropped low, a behavior Jack now recognized as his alert posture. Through the trees ahead, the dim outline of a cabin emerged, a small weathered structure perched on the edge of a steep ravine. Mike gestured for them to take cover behind a fallen tree. "No lights," he whispered. "But someone's there." Wood smoke from the chimney. Claire raised her night vision binoculars. Single heat signature inside. One vehicle hidden under the north side deck. Matches the description of Reeves' Jeep. "What's the play?" Jack asked, feeling his heartbeat quicken. "We need confirmation it's him before we move in," Claire replied. "And we need to know if he has the bio-weapon." Shadow was watching them intently, his body quivering with barely contained energy. He understood they had reached their objective. "Shadow can confirm," Jack said suddenly. "He knows Reeves' scent better than anyone." Claire looked skeptical. "It's too risky. If Reeves sees him, he won't," Jack insisted. "You said it yourself, they called him the Shadow for a reason." After a moment's hesitation, Claire nodded. She removed Shadow's harness and replaced it with a smaller, lighter version, equipped with a tiny camera. "Just reconnaissance," she instructed, looking directly into Shadow's eyes. "Circle the cabin, confirm the occupant, then return. Understand?" Shadow's focus was absolute. Jack recognized the shift in his demeanor. This was what he had been trained for. "Good luck," Jack whispered, giving Shadow a gentle pat. Without a sound, Shadow slipped away, becoming one with the darkness. Through Claire's tablet, they watched the feed from his camera as he moved, a ghost-like figure gliding between trees, approaching the cabin from downwind. Shadow circled the structure once, surveying all angles before settling beneath a side window. The camera angle shifted, as he raised his head just enough to peer inside. The cabin's interior was dimly lit by a wood stove. A man sat at a table, his back to the window, working on something they couldn't quite see. But even from behind, Jack recognized the military bearing, the buzzed haircut, the broad shoulders tensed with purpose. "That's him," Claire breathed. "That's Reeves." Shadow's camera panned slightly, focusing on what lay on the table. Several metal vials identical to the one from the ship footage, along with what appeared to be delivery devices, syringes, aerosol containers, even what looked like modified bullets. "He has the toxin," Mike whispered, "and he's weaponizing it." Suddenly, Shadow's camera jerked. A high-pitched sound, almost beyond human hearing, emanated from somewhere inside the cabin. Shadow stumbled, his vision blurring as he retreated from the window. "What's happening?" Jack demanded. "Ultrasonic deterrent," Claire hissed. "He's got anti-K9 measures in place. Shadow needs to get out of there now." On screen, Shadow was already retreating, but his movements had become erratic. The sound was disorienting him, scrambling his trained responses. Then the cabin door swung open. Marcus Reeves stepped out, a handgun raised, scanning the darkness. "I know you're there," says Seven. His voice carried clearly through the night air. "Still alive, huh? Tougher than I gave you credit for." Shadow had taken cover beneath the deck, but the camera showed his view of Reeves' boots, just yards away. "Come on out, boy," Reeves called, voice deceptively gentle. "I won't hurt you this time, promise." Jack felt rage building in his chest. This was the man who had sent Shadow to die,
betrayed not just his mission, but the unbreakable bond that should exist between handler and dog. "We need to move," Jack whispered urgently. "Now." Claire nodded, signaling a flanking maneuver. Mike would circle left, she would go right, and Jack would create a distraction to draw Reeves away from Shadow's position. Jack moved 20 yards west, then deliberately snapped a branch underfoot. The sound cracked through the silent forest like a gunshot. Reeves immediately spun, weapon raised toward the noise. "Who's there?" he called, voice steady, despite the surprise. Jack stepped partially into view, hands raised. "Just me." "Who the hell are you?" Reeves demanded, gun trained on Jack's chest. "The guy who pulled your dog out of the Atlantic," Jack replied evenly. 217 miles offshore, swimming for his life, because you activated Protocol Z. Reeves' expression flickered, recognition, then calculation. "You don't understand what you've stepped into, friend." "I understand loyalty," Jack countered, "something you seem to have forgotten." Reeves laughed, a hollow sound. "Loyalty? To what? A government that sends us on suicide missions. A country that discards us when we're no longer useful." He gestured around the remote cabin. "This is what loyalty got me. A life in hiding, watching my back every day." "So you sold out," Jack said. "What was the price for betraying your oath? For trying to kill your own dog?"
"Enough to disappear forever," Reeves answered coldly. "The Russians paid well for what I recovered. The private buyers will pay even better for what I've developed from it." As they spoke, Jack caught glimpses of movement in his peripheral vision, Claire and Mike getting into position. Shadow had recovered from the sonic weapon and was silently creeping around the side of the cabin. "You won't get away with this," Jack said, keeping Reeves' attention fixed on him. "I already have," Reeves replied. "After tonight, Marcus Reeves disappears. New identity, new life." His expression hardened. "But first, I need to clean up loose ends." He raised his weapon, finger tensing on the trigger. A black blur launched from the shadows, a perfectly executed takedown that Jack had seen in Shadow's training videos. 100 pounds of muscle and focus slammed into Reeves from behind, sending the gun flying as man and dog crashed to the ground. Reeves shouted in pain and surprise, rolling to defend himself against the animal he had betrayed. But Shadow wasn't attacking mindlessly. He had been trained for controlled apprehension. His jaws clamped around Reeves' forearm, not crushing but restraining, holding him in place. Claire and Mike converged from both sides, weapons drawn. "Federal agents," Claire shouted, confirming Jack's suspicions about her true occupation. "Don't move." Reeves froze, eyes locked with Shadow's as the dog held him immobile, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "You should have died out there," Reeves spat at the dog. "But he didn't," Jack said, approaching slowly. "He survived to bring you to justice." Shadow maintained his hold until Claire had Reeves secured with zip ties. Only then did he release the arm, backing away to stand beside Jack, their shoulders touching in a gesture that spoke volumes. Inside the cabin, they discovered the full extent of Reeves' betrayal, not just the bioweapon from the Russian ship, but detailed plans for its distribution to terrorist cells across 3 continents. The former handler had been planning a sale that would have triggered chaos across the globe. As Claire called in an extraction team on a secure line, Jack knelt beside Shadow, checking him for injuries from the confrontation. "You did it," he said softly, running his hands through the dog's thick fur. "You completed the mission." Shadow leaned against him, the military precision in his posture softening slightly. For the first time since his rescue, he looked not like a weapon or a tool, but simply like a dog who had found his way home. Chapter 6. The decision. 3 days later, Jack stood on the deck of a government facility overlooking the Potomac River. Behind him, a series of meetings had just concluded, debriefings with intelligence officials, military commanders, and Justice Department representatives. The evidence Shadow had recovered had exposed not just Reeves' betrayal but a network of corruption that reached into the highest levels of several agencies. Shadow sat beside him, wearing a new tactical vest with official insignia, his status restored, his value recognized. The dog's posture was perfect, his attention focused on the river before them, occasionally glancing up at Jack with those intelligent amber eyes. Claire approached, her footsteps deliberately audible so as not to startle either of them. "The paperwork's ready," she said, holding a folder. "They've reinstated Shadow's official status. K97 is back on the books as an active asset." Jack nodded but didn't reach for the folder. "And where will they deploy him next?" Claire hesitated. "He's valuable, Jack. The most highly trained maritime K9 in the program. With Reeves eliminated, they'll assign him a new handler, probably overseas operations." Shadow's ears twitched at the words, though he remained outwardly calm. "He nearly died for them once," Jack said quietly. "And they wrote him off without a second thought." "That was Reeves' decision, not the agency's," Claire countered, though her voice lacked conviction. Jack turned to face her fully. "You know as well as I do that dogs like Shadow are considered equipment. Valuable equipment, sure, but still expendable when the mission requires it." Claire couldn't hold his gaze. They both knew he was right. "What's the alternative?" she asked finally. "He's not a pet, Jack. He's been trained from birth for this work. It's all he knows." Jack looked down at Shadow, who was watching him with complete attention. "Maybe, but he also knows what it's like to swim 200 miles for survival. To be betrayed and still fight on. To choose who to trust." He placed a hand gently on Shadow's head. "I think he deserves the right to choose his next mission." Claire's expression softened. "You've become attached. We both have." Jack corrected her. "But this isn't about me, it's about him." Claire glanced around to ensure they were alone, then lowered her voice. "There might be a way. Shadow's official status was deceased until 3 days ago. Bureaucracy being what it is, I could delay the reinstatement paperwork. Say he needs rehabilitation time. Medical evaluation." Hope flared in Jack's chest. "How long?" "A few weeks. Maybe a month." She hesitated, then added, "Long enough for you to disappear, if that's what you decide." Jack was silent for a long moment, considering. "He saved my life too, you know. Not by pulling me from the ocean, but by reminding me what it means to keep fighting when everything is against you." Claire nodded, understanding in her eyes. "The fishing boat in North Carolina. It was just something to do," Jack admitted, "a way to be alone with the ocean. I wasn't really living since I left the service." He looked down at Shadow. "He changed that. They'll look for him eventually," Claire warned. "We'll be careful," Jack promised. "Besides, he's pretty good at staying in the shadows." Claire smiled slightly, then reached into her pocket and pulled out Shadow's broken tag, the one with just the letter S, still visible. "He'll need this, whatever you decide." She walked away, leaving the folder on the railing, carried off by the wind that swept up from the river below. Jack looked down at Shadow. "What do you say, boy? Ready for a new mission?" Shadow's tail swept once across the deck, decisive, certain. Together they walked away from the facility, away from the paperwork, away from a life of being assets and operators. No one stopped them. No alarm sounded. Perhaps Claire had already ensured their departure would go unnoticed, or perhaps some things were simply meant to be. 2 weeks later, Jack's fishing boat, newly rechristened _Second Chance _, glided through the waters off the Florida Keys. Shadow stood at the bow, his black coat gleaming in the sunlight, nose lifted to catch the salt breeze. Jack had sold his cabin in North Carolina, using the money to refit the boat for longer journeys. They had spent the past fortnight sailing south, stopping in small marinas where questions were few and privacy respected. Shadow had adjusted to boat life with remarkable ease. Each morning, he would swim alongside the vessel for exercise, powerful strokes carrying him through the water, not as a desperate survivor now, but as a creature in his element. Each night, he would sleep on deck under the stars, alert to every change in wind or current. They weren't running, exactly, more like redefining themselves, becoming something new together, not handler and K9, not even master and pet, but partners navigating a world that had tried and failed to break them both. Jack had begun taking charter clients, tourists wanting deep-sea fishing experiences, researchers studying marine ecosystems, occasionally even search and rescue operations, when local authorities needed help.
Shadow had become something of a legend among the coastal communities, the dog who could find anything in the water, who understood commands in multiple languages, who watched over the boat and its passengers with unwavering attention. No one asked where he had come from. In these waters, everyone had a past they'd rather leave behind. On this particular evening, as the sun melted into the horizon in a blaze of orange and crimson, Jack sat on the deck, cleaning the day's catch. Shadow lay nearby, head on paws, eyes half closed in contentment. "You know," Jack said conversationally, "a year ago, I was just going through the motions, existing, not living." He glanced at Shadow, who had opened one eye to watch him. "Funny how life sends you exactly what you need, even when it comes in the most unexpected package." Shadow's tail thumped once against the deck. Jack smiled, reaching over to scratch behind the dog's ears. The tag Claire had returned hung from Shadow's new collar, a simple leather band that held no tactical significance, no hidden technology, just the single letter S, as a reminder of who he had been and who he had chosen to become. "We've got a rescue call tomorrow," Jack continued. "Family stranded on one of the outer islands. Their boat engine failed." He paused. "Should be simple enough, but it's good work, the kind that matters." Shadow sat up, suddenly alert, his gaze fixed on something in the distance. Jack followed his line of sight, but saw nothing except open water and the approaching night. "What is it, boy?" Shadow stood moving to the bow, nose lifted to the wind. After a moment, he relaxed, looking back at Jack with what could only be described as satisfaction, and Jack understood. Shadow wasn't watching for threats anymore. He was simply embracing his freedom, savoring the vastness of choices before them, the infinite possibilities of a life reclaimed. "Yeah," Jack said softly, "I feel it too." As darkness settled over the ocean, the stars emerged one by one, reflected in the calm water until it seemed they were floating through the cosmos itself. Man and dog, once lost in their own ways, now found in each other's salvation, sailed onward into a future they had chosen together. Chapter 7. The Legacy 1 year later. The emergency call came in at 3:17 a.m. A fishing vessel taking on water 30 miles offshore, 5 crew members in danger. The Coast Guard had dispatched their nearest cutter, but it was still an hour away. By then it might be too late. Jack pulled on his waterproof gear while listening to the coordinates over the radio. Shadow was already at the door, tactical vest secured, eyes bright with focus despite the early hour. No command had been given, none was needed. The dog understood the urgency in Jack's movements, the quickened rhythm of preparation. "Looks like a rough one," Jack said, checking their emergency supplies. "Storm's picking up out there." Shadow's posture straightened, ready, willing, unafraid. They had been running these unofficial rescue operations for months now, a silent partnership with the Coast Guard station in Key West. Nothing on paper, nothing official, just a call when they needed an extra boat with special capabilities, particularly one with a dog who could find people in water better than any human diver. The _second chance cut through the turbulent pre-dawn waters, powerful engines pushing against the building waves. Jack studied the radar, plotting the most direct course to the sinking vessel. Beside him, Shadow stood braced against the pitch and roll, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the first hints of lightning illuminated the storm clouds. When they reached the coordinates, the situation was dire. The fishing boat was listing heavily to port, its deck already partially submerged. 3 crew members clung to the higher starboard rail, while 2 more had taken to a small life raft that was being tossed dangerously by the growing swells. Jack maneuvered alongside the stricken vessel, calling out instructions to the stranded fishermen. One by one, they jumped across to the _second chance Jack helping them aboard. But as the last man prepared to leap, a massive wave crashed over the fishing boat, accelerating its sink rate dramatically. The man lost his footing and disappeared beneath the churning water. "Man overboard," one of the rescued crew shouted, pointing frantically to where his crewmate had vanished. Without hesitation, Shadow leapt from the deck of the _second chance piercing the water with barely a splash. Jack threw a rescue line after him, keeping one eye on the spot where the dog had disappeared and the other on the life raft now drifting away with its 2 occupants. Agonizing seconds passed.
The storm intensified, rain lashing the deck, waves crashing over the bow. The rescued fishermen huddled in the cabin, but Jack remained at the rail, scanning the water desperately. Then, a dark shape breaching the surface. Shadow's head appeared, followed by his powerful shoulders as he swam with determined strokes. In his jaws he gripped the collar of the unconscious fisherman, keeping the man's face above water with practiced precision. Jack threw the rescue ring, and Shadow guided the unconscious man toward it, never releasing his grip until Jack and one of the stronger fishermen had hauled the victim aboard. "He's not breathing," the fisherman cried, laying his crewmate on the deck. Jack immediately began CPR, while Shadow pulled himself aboard with practiced ease, shaking water from his fur before positioning himself nearby, watching the rescue effort with intense focus. After 30 seconds of compressions, the fallen fisherman coughed violently, expelling seawater from his lungs. Jack rolled him onto his side, relief washing through him as the man began to breathe on his own. "Your dog," the man gasped when he could finally speak, looking at Shadow with wonder. "He found me in the dark. How?" Jack just smiled, reaching out to stroke Shadow's wet fur. "That's what he does. He finds people who are lost." With the first rescue complete, they turned their attention to the life raft, now barely visible in the worsening storm. Jack pushed the engines to their limit, closing the distance while Shadow stood at the bow, tracking the raft's position with uncanny accuracy, even when it disappeared temporarily behind massive swells. The two men in the life raft were in bad shape by the time Jack reached them, hypothermic, one with a broken arm from the initial accident. The raft itself was taking on water, minutes from sinking. The rescue was precarious, the vessels knocking together in the heavy seas. But with Shadow helping to secure the rescue lines and Jack's skilled maneuvering, they managed to bring both men safely aboard. "Never seen anything like it," one of the rescued fishermen remarked later, as they steamed back toward Key West, the storm finally beginning to abate behind them. "That dog works better than most rescue swimmers I've seen." Jack nodded, watching as Shadow made his rounds of the cabin, checking on each survivor with methodical care, especially the man he had pulled from the water. He was trained for it, but now he chooses to do it. Makes all the difference. The fisherman studied Shadow with newfound respect. "Military dog. Something like that," Jack replied, not elaborating. Now he's just Shadow. The sun was breaking through the clouds as they approached the harbor, painting the sky in brilliant golds and crimsons. Coast Guard vehicles waited at the dock, along with ambulances for the injured fishermen. As Jack tied up the boat, a tall figure approached along the pier, Claire, looking exactly as she had a year ago, though now dressed in casual clothes rather than tactical gear. "Heard there was some excitement out there," she said, by way of greeting. Jack nodded toward the ambulances, where paramedics were attending to the rescued crew. "Could have been worse." Claire's gaze shifted to Shadow, who had recognized her instantly, and approached with cautious familiarity. "He looks good, healthy, purpose-driven." "He is," Jack confirmed. "Never misses a training day, never balks at rough water, even in the worst conditions. He's first on deck, ready to go." Claire crouched, allowing Shadow to sniff her hand before she gently stroked his head. "The agency's been asking questions again, about where Asset S7 disappeared to." Jack tensed slightly. And I told them the truth, that some assets aren't meant to be controlled, that sometimes the best service comes from freedom, not obligation." She straightened up. "They've closed the file. Officially, K-97 was lost at sea during Operation Blackfish." Relief washed through Jack. "Thank you." Claire nodded. "Don't thank me. The work you two are doing here, it speaks for itself. 5 lives saved today alone. It's what we're good at," Jack said simply. "It's who you are," Claire corrected him. She reached into her pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This came through official channels. Thought you should have it." Jack opened it carefully. Inside was a formal commendation from the Naval Special Warfare Command, addressed to K-9 Shadow for extraordinary service and sacrifice. At the bottom was a handwritten note. "Some debts can never be repaid, but they should always be acknowledged." "They know?" Jack asked, surprised. Claire smiled slightly. "Let's just say certain people have been keeping tabs on your rescue operations. People who appreciate that some of the best work happens off the books." She turned to go, then paused. Oh, and Jack, there's talk of establishing a specialized maritime K-9 rescue program based on what you two have accomplished here. Officially sanctioned, but independently operated. They'd like you to train the first teams. Jack looked down at Shadow, who was watching the conversation with clear understanding. What do you think, partner? Ready to teach others what you know? Shadow's tail swept once across the deck. Affirmative. Later that evening, with the rescued fishermen safely in the hospital, and the second chance refueled and resupplied for the next mission, Jack and Shadow sat on the aft deck watching the sunset. A gentle breeze carried the scents of salt and distant rain, and the harbor lights began to twinkle as darkness approached. Jack held the commendation letter in his hands, reading it again, in the fading light. You know what this means? He asked Shadow. You're not a ghost anymore, not a shadow. You're real, recognized for who you are, not what you were trained to be. Shadow shifted closer, resting his head on Jack's knee, a gesture of trust and affection that had evolved slowly over their year together. Jack scratched behind the dog's ears, exactly where he liked it best. From 217 miles offshore to right here. Quite a journey, huh? Shadow blinked slowly, contentment radiating from his relaxed posture. I used to think I rescued you, Jack continued softly. Now I'm not so sure. Maybe we rescued each other. As night fell completely, stars emerged above them, the same stars that had guided them through dark waters and stormy rescues, the same stars that had witnessed Shadow's desperate swim for survival, and Jack's own journey from isolation back to purpose. Man and dog, once adrift in their separate ways, now anchored in each other's strengths. The ocean stretched before them, not as a barrier but as a path, to second chances, to lives worth saving, to a future built on the courage to keep swimming when the shore is nowhere in sight. For in the end, the greatest journeys are never about the distance traveled, but about who travels beside you, and why you choose to press on when all hope seems lost. Shadow had understood this truth while fighting the merciless sea. Jack had learned it while extending his hand to a drowning soul. Together they had transformed it into something more powerful than either could have achieved alone, a legacy not of obedience, but of choice, not of control, but of trust, not merely of survival, but of truly living. And as the night deepened around their boat named _second chance that legacy continued to grow, one rescue, one life, one act of courage at a time. If this story moved you, please subscribe to K9 Code Red for more incredible tales of heroism and the unbreakable bond between humans and their four-legged partners. Like this video and share it with someone who believes in second chances. Shadow's journey reminds us all that no matter how lost we feel, there's always a way back, sometimes on our own strength, and sometimes through the hearts of those who refuse to let us drown.